All right, y'all. So, my name is Ryan Byers. I'm the owner of Front Range Compliance Services. I think I spoke to y'all last year. We did some preventative maintenance. I'm going to kind of elaborate on that. I got some new stuff with that. I took out some of the stuff also, and I'm also going to be talking about some other things that are going on within the overall DOT. Within this last couple years, or I guess this year we've got a few changes and some things like that. So I have a full packed period of time with y'all to try to go through and explain this. And I tend to really kind of dive deep into a lot of these topics, and I'm very passionate about the things that we're going to be talking to you about. But with that, sometimes I give the information really, really fast. And don't fear, we're still here for you. So if you find yourself that you've got questions, or you're not quite clear on the topic that I have talked to you about, feel free to reach out to any one of my team members. So down on the bottom of this page, our website, frontrangecompliance.com. Some of the forms and stuff I'm talking about are available on there in the forms section. The other thing is all the contacts, my compliance managers and myself, we are available on there. If you want to reach out to us, check that all out, and we'll make ourselves available. So real quick, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the owner of Front Range Compliance Services and D.O.T University. Currently we work with thousands of companies here in Colorado and surrounding throughout the nation, with the power of the internet. Our goal is to help those companies with their DOT compliance, maybe just make life a little bit easier for them and help them to stay off the radar, to be a little bit safer. Formerly, I was a state trooper here in Colorado. I was a technician, which is, a step above a trooper. I was a specialty section trooper. Working in the DOT motor carrier safety. I was also an inspector, an auditor, and the DOT training coordinator. And I worked with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration as a master instructor for the DOT programs. So with that, just a real quick shout out for me, my team, DOT University. We are available at dotuniversity.org. We'll have a slide toward the end of that. We're opening it up for questions, but we are available. We have some trainings that you can purchase on there for your team or for you. They're really great. We have discount codes. So, if you want to do like a bulk training, you want to get those a little bit less, reach out to us. We'll work with you. We'll give you a discount on those. We do have a lot of free topics, just short topics on YouTube and Rumble, if you also want to check that out. All right. So with that, let's get this thing going. Now, I encourage each of you to ask questions. That's one of the things about DOT is a lot of times you're thinking of the question, and chances are everybody else is also. So when you're going through, you think of it a couple different ways. You can type it in the chat. I have somebody here helping me monitor chat. So if we get a bunch of questions, you can also send the message to me directly in chat. You're also welcome to unmute yourself. And it sounds like we've got one person out there in the Zoom land that's got an unmuted mic. So because I keep getting a little bit of feedback from you. So if that's you, if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment and just hitting that mute button, so it just seems like these microphones on these computers, they pick every bit of sound for miles. So again, if you got a live mic right now, if you wouldn't mind just tapping mute, that'd be great. The next thing that we're going to do, if you have questions, you can raise your hands. We'll identify that. So unmute, send me a message or a message to the entire group, and we'll go from there. So with that, we're going to start off with 2023 updates. And this is going to be our topics for today. We're going to talk about the top 5 violations in Colorado for safety and compliance, okay? And we're going to talk about some of the things that are going on with those violations, and also how you as a safety person or owner of a company or whatever your role and responsibility is, maybe how you could help prevent some of those violations within your own company or within your own team. I'm going to be talking about the FMCSA clearinghouse, okay? I'm going to give you a little bit of an update and some of the challenges that companies face for 2023. And I'm also going to be talking to you about hours of service, because again, when we're talking about the top 5 violations, those fall within there. And then we're going to kind of end it with going through what is required for vehicle maintenance, because vehicle maintenance is still probably that biggest thing that we see with our clients that is still drawing and triggering audits within the DOT. So because of your on-road performance, things that are going on, and a lot of companies, let's just face it, a lot of companies get upside down in maintenance, and they're chasing their repairs rather than properly staying on top of them and scheduling those so that you can be prepared for that. So let's go ahead and jump into the top 5 violations in Colorado. This was for 2022. Now, of course, my graphic is the top 10, just because I thought it was kind of interesting to show the whole little blurb of what we had here in Colorado. And no, we kind of go through, we look at it. That first violation we have right here, this is the 382.711B, and that was clearinghouse registrations. And what we're actually seeing here, and this is one of the top violations nationwide, which I find it kind of interesting, because every time we hear from the feds, they're saying, oh, we're at 90% compliance, but yet, company after company goes through audit and they're not registered in the clearinghouse. So again, we only had 181 violations in Colorado, but that's again a pretty high number of violations given the number of audits that were done in 2022 in Colorado. So again, clearinghouse registration companies are in there. The next one that we have is in that clearinghouse, we've got pre-employment queries. Companies just are not doing the proper pre-employment queries. And then the violation number 3 that's 392.2, and what that violation is, that's when an enforcement officer, whether on a roadside or even in an audit, if they see that a company has done something to violate a state law that's not federal, they can write it into the coding 392.2. It's kind of like the catch-all, so they can write up a state law violation in the regulation. So it's kind of hard to say what specifically that is. I know on roadsides, we typically see that as seat belts, falling too closely, lane changes, speeding. Usually your typical traffic violations are written up in 392.2, but there could be some other ones in an audit. The 4th violation was hours of service, and that was going to be for no records of duty status. And again, I will be coming back and talking to you about that specifically with the how that kind of pertains, and I think it'll really pertain to you as the industry, because I think a lot of those violations are being driven from improper use of the short haul provision. So we'll talk about that. And then the last violation number 5 that I will talk about this morning, is going to be, again, we're going back to the clearinghouse, and that is going to be for the annual clearing. So, as we're kind of looking at this, we see that the violations that we're getting are identified. We're with the FMCSA clearinghouse for the last 3 years with these the testings. Hang on, guys, I got to pause. The clicking of the microphone is just deafening in my ears in here. So I don't know whose mic it is that is unmuted, but I'm gonna find you here just real quick, because it's getting worse and worse and worse. There you are.
So Ryan, I see everybody's got their mic muted. So
there was one. There was one. I found it. So I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I got them muted now. So perfect. All right, perfect. That helped a lot. I just was getting a whole lot of feedback in my as I was trying to talk through it. Okay, so why is the FMCSA clearinghouse absolutely so important? And that's going to be because, between 2020 and 2023, all the positive drug tests, they're getting, all stored, all that information is getting warehoused within this clearinghouse. And it's getting warehoused in a manner that's to help you, to prevent you from hiring a positive tested driver. So the first thing that you got to do is you have to make sure that you're registered. And I'm sure the majority of you probably are registered. But if you're not, like if you're just kind of hearing this for the first time, we want to make sure that you're registered, because when it comes to the FMCSA clearinghouse, these are the statistics. And I pulled these this morning. This is as it was reported, as of January 4th. So this is the most recent report that they're offering in the FMCSA clearinghouse. So you can see these are what has been tested for positive tests. And this is what, we've got going on out there. So we've got a grand total right now of 177,376 drivers that have tested positive for one of these substances that are out there. Now, this isn't even counting the refusals. There's even more when we come into how many drivers refuse to test, or even the alcohol test. This is all I'm showing you in this one slide is just the drug test. Now, I like this slide because I find it kind of fascinating to see what we in a nation, as a nation, what we're testing positive for. And you can see right up there at the top, number one, marijuana, right? And a lot of this, we got to make sure, with your training and your training programs, you've got to communicate with your team. We're seeing, positives and complaints, of course, of people that are using it, but we're also seeing positives of people that are coming back and claiming that they're using some type of a CBD or something like that. So when they come back and they ask, you've got to advise them a CBD is in fact a marijuana derivative product. So it is going to contain marijuana. And if you ask people within the CBD industry, they'll actually tell you that the CBD products need a little bit of a THC boost in order to really make them work. So it kind of sounds to me like it's just an excuse to get some more THC. But your drivers, again, they have to know that it's a banned substance, okay? We don't know what the timeline is for the FMCSA to, or the federal government to, release the restrictions of marijuana. I don't see it coming anytime in the next 5 years. Okay. It might even be further out from that. I don't know where the science is behind that, but that's a big part of it. So really be communicating, with your drivers. So again,
Hey, Ryan,
yes,
this is Kathy. Sorry to interrupt, but are you showing your presentation slides?
yeah, I was. Let me check here what we got.
Okay, because we're not seeing them. So I wasn't
Oh,
sure
well,
if you had slides
I
up.
definitely apologize about that.
Eh,
Let's see what we got happening here. So, yep, we got some craziness going on here. My apologies. It looks like I may have. All righty. Kathy, I am having presentation problems. So, yeah, it said that
You
it
want to send it to me
Nope,
and
I
I
got it.
can,
I think we
oh,
got it. I think I
yeah,
just clicked on the wrong share there. So that's my
yeah.
bad. So sorry, y'all. Sorry, y'all. Here I was scooting along and thinking everybody knew what was going on. All right, let me just find my presentation again here. Okay, there we are. So we're here. Let me just back up just a little bit to show you these numbers. So these were the top 5 that we were just kind of going through and talking about. And then I was showing you the positive tests within the FMCSA clearinghouse. So again, within that FMCSA clearinghouse, the positive tests, this is the list of since 2020, since the start and the implementation, all of the positive tests. So that 177,376, these are the positive tested drivers. This is just for the test for drugs. It doesn't count any of the refusals. It doesn't count any of the alcohol tests. I'm just showing you the drugs first. And you can see that marijuana, again, is at the top each year. And we've gone up each year, like in 2020 with 29,000, 2021, 31,000, and then 2022, 40,000. So that's 2021 to 2022, that's a pretty big jump compared to the year previous. So we're seeing that trend, which is one of the reasons why I'm stressing communicate with your teams. Let them know that CBD products are still banned and they can't be used. So that kind of thing. So again, now that we're back on track and y'all can see that. Now those slides and everything, if you go, are the results of the clearinghouse. If you go to the FMCSA clearinghouse, you can download that report, and it was printed or updated as of January 4th of 2023. So you can see all the updated data. There's like 10, 12 pages, in that report. They give you a lot of information regarding testing, how many drivers are on their way back, like going through a treatment program and ready for a return to duty test, or in the follow-up testing program. So again, this is one of those reasons what's so important about the clearinghouse is, out of 177,000 positive drug tests, when somebody is knocking on your door saying, hey, we want or we need to take a test, or we need a job, you're going to be the one that's saying, yeah, maybe there's a reason. Maybe they failed the test or whatever else, because right now we have that many drivers out there that are there. And additionally, so one of the new things that's going to be happen as of coming up here in 2024, all of the states are going to be required to check the clearinghouse against the CDL and drivers that have a positive test in the clearinghouse are going to be, their licenses are going to be getting canceled. So again, that is one of the new things that's going to be happening. We're seeing some of that already happening here in Colorado. So, all right. So with that, again, we have the top 5 violations, and of those top 3, or the top 3 of the violations are FMCSA clearinghouse. So the first one is registration. So I think what really happened with that is we go back in time. If you go back to the January 6th of 2020, that was the implementation date of that clearinghouse. And what happened is it collapsed like day one, like 9 months leading up into it. The feds were trying to get everybody to get registered, get ready for it. And of course, we as human nature waited till the last minute, and the whole system collapsed. Well, right around January 6th, in those next few months that leading into COVID, the whole world got turned upside down. There were COVID restrictions. Feds, the federal offices were closed. It just was an absolute nightmare. So it took them several months to really kind of get everything fixed, but it is fixed. So if you did go through and you got locked out of your FMCSA clearinghouse and you just never did anything with it and you haven't done anything with it, you need to go back in and get it registered. Now, if you need help, give us a shout. We will help you get it going. And now, with the registration process, and there's a lot of reasons why people haven't done it, it takes 2 days to get that program wiped out, get re-registered, and get it running again. So, like I said, that's part of the reason why a lot of companies are delaying, because who amongst us has 2 days to wait for the feds to get their act together, right? But we have to do it because this clearinghouse is absolutely vital, and they are really cracking down on companies that are not doing the FMCSA clearinghouse. Okay, now with that, when it comes to the clearinghouse, you're required to query your drivers. Now, the first thing the first rule of thumb with it when dealing with the CDL, and let me specify that when I'm talking about drivers, generally I'm talking about both CDL and non-CDL, like identifying your fleet, which I'm going to talk a little bit later. But for clearinghouse, we're dealing with just CDL operations, your drivers that are required to be in your DOT drug and alcohol testing program. So with that, when you hire or a driver comes in and says, hey, I want a job, no driver can be considered unless he or she is registered for that FMCSA clearinghouse. So how you do that is you ask them, but you also, when they're coming in and you're starting their hiring process, you do what's called a pre-employment FMCSA clearinghouse query. And what that is a full query. So the driver is required to log into their own account and grant you access. So if you're in the middle of your hiring process and you do a pre-employment query, but the driver has never sent you or never authorized that query to go through, then you are going to be hiring a driver that hasn't granted you that query. Eventually, that's going to be all looked at nearly the same as hiring a positive tested driver, because if you put them to work and you never get that query, and we have that happen a lot, like we'll do the query, we'll tell the company, hey, the driver hasn't granted us consent, and then they're like, okay, well, they're already working, we hired them, and then they just sit there, and then when the DOT knocks on their door and says, hey, we're doing an audit, they look at us and say, well, why didn't you do the query? And it's like, well, we tried to. So again, like I said, make sure you always do that pre-employment query first. The driver has to log into their account and they have to grant you that. So one of the biggest things is understand what is your procedure within your clearinghouse and whose role is that, okay? And I'm going to come back to role here in just a second. So the last query you have to do is at a minimum of at least once a year, you have to do what's called a limited annual query. Now you can do the limited query as often as you want, okay, but at a minimum, the DOT just expects you to do these at least once a year. Now, what the limited query is the driver doesn't need to log in, so you can run your whole team. And what it basically tells you is either yes, they're good, or no, they're prohibited, right? And then if a driver does come back prohibited, then you have to return and do what's called a full query on them to determine what's going on, because then they have a restriction in the clearinghouse that prevents them from driving to being authorized. So again, when we kind of go back to the clearinghouse, there's a lot that goes in with it, and I just am giving you a snapshot. I could talk for probably 2 hours just on clearinghouse topic alone with you. But with that, it is absolutely vital to do some training with your team so they understand what clearinghouse is. Make sure that you have a policy with that and establish whose roles it is. Now, there are a lot of third-party service providers, so the drug and alcohol training or the drug and alcohol service providers for your DOT testing that will also do it. But unfortunately, there are even more that aren't doing this and they're not communicating. And we actually run into some scenarios where some claim that they are doing them, but then they're not, they don't do it. And they're even registered in the clearinghouse claiming that they do that. Okay. Now I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. All I'm saying is call your clearing or your drug and alcohol testing providers and find out what their roles are. Make sure that you know, because if they're not going to do the clearinghouse, that doesn't necessarily make them a bad drug and alcohol testing company, but it's just a role that you're going to have to assume within your own company to make sure that you're doing that and answering for all of these clearinghouse topics. Okay, so I'm going to kind of move on from clearinghouse again because it's kind of a big topic, and from there I want to move into some hours of service. Again, if you have any questions, please make sure that you either let me know, unmute yourself, or shoot a question into the chat box. Now, with the hours of service, one of the top 5 violations was no records of duty status. Now, the term no records of duty status, sometimes that can also be RODS, the term RODS, RODS, records of duty status. And that is one of the big violations that we do have here. Now, before I go too far, looks like I may have had a question come in. Say, are we to register the employees or do they register themselves? That's a really great question, and I'm glad you asked that. So the employees are required to actually register themselves. They what they do is they have to log in and create their own account. Now, if you have had drivers that have worked with you prior to January 6, 2020, and they're still gainfully employed by you, okay, you do not need to make them register, okay, because you don't need to do a full query on them. The only time they'll have to register is if you need to do a full query for them, or if they seek an employment opportunity away from you, they would have to create their own account. So again, totally up to you. They register your own account for their accounts. Now, what I ran into and what we typically see, some drivers are really great with technology and some drivers aren't so great with that technology. So if you're kind of seeing that you've kind of got that mix, or you have an employee that is not currently registered for the FMCSA clearinghouse but needs to get registered, don't be afraid to sit down and help them through the registration process. But they are going to need an email in order for the account to access. So like I said, make sure that you can sit down and help them. It's just that you're not supposed to do it specifically for them. But that was a really great question, and I do appreciate that. Okay, it looks like we might have a follow-up there. Yep, gotcha. You're welcome. All right, perfect. So with that, back to this hours of service thing. So I was really kind of surprised because in the nation, we have false logs is one of the top 5 violations, but in Colorado, no records of duty status is in that top 5. And I know from my experience from doing audit and my experience from also working with companies in Colorado, I know exactly what this is deriving from, and it is going to be the inappropriate use of the short haul exception. Okay. And now again, we have CDL and non-CDL operations. So I'll show you a slide here in a little bit, as well as we've sent everybody out my CMV identification flow charts, because when it comes to this, a lot of people don't realize when they're driving pickups and trailers that they are a commercial motor vehicle and they have the exact same hours of service requirements as somebody driving an 18-wheeler. So what I have put up here for you, this is just a quick example of a time card, because everybody, unless you're a farmer rancher engaging in agricultural operations or a utility service vehicle, okay, everybody's got to have some form of hours of service. The other big thing that we see a lot of times, especially in small businesses, where the owner or the hierarchy of the company, those managers, they continue to drive, they too have to have some form of hours of service. And it's real simple. If you're a local driver, that means you're working within a 150-mile radius, you're going to have a timesheet, a time record. The time record has to show the date, okay, the start of the shift, the end of the shift, and the total hours for the shift. Now, I put a little bit of extra stuff in my hours of service time record, because that's stuff that we need for compliance, okay? Because hours of service is extremely difficult. So it's very, very helpful because some days you're a CMV, a commercial vehicle, some days you're driving a non-CMV. Well, the DOT can only hold you accountable for hours of service on the days that you're driving an actual regulated vehicle, which is why I've got power units on here and so on and so forth, along with some additional notes. So again, this is just kind of an example of what a timesheet would be. Now, just a second ago, I referenced managers, okay? Y'all, I'm assuming I got a whole bunch of managers listening to me today, and I really hate to be the bearer of bad news, but here's the deal. If you drive a regulated vehicle, okay, and I'm going to show you that flow chart here in just a minute. If you drive a regulated vehicle, you have to have a timesheet. And if you don't have something like this timesheet, and it can be any format, as long as you're gathering start, stop, and total hours, then you have to have a logbook. Okay. And if you're driving a truck that's 2000 year model, 2000 or newer, you're only allowed to do 8 paper logs before you have to have an ELD. So no matter what, managers, every day you all have to have a time record. And I'm very well aware you're on salary, but you have to remember when it comes to DOT hours of service, or when it talks about tracking of hours, we're thinking about 2 different organizations. You've got the Colorado Department of Labor and you have the DOT, okay? And I can tell you right now, the DOT wins that battle. So they're the ones that are going to say you absolutely have to have some form of hours of service tracking, okay? All right, so when it comes to this, one of the handouts that I have passed on to everybody, and this should have come out in your email, looks like this. This is one of my hours of service flow charts. And what this one right here was for local CDL drivers. And what we're doing is we're taking the short haul, okay, and we're crunching it into a flow chart. So we're pulled it out of the regulations, put it in a flow chart to help you understand. Now your driver would, or you would apply this flow chart every day for every one of your shifts. And if you answer no, it'll drop you to the bottom of the chart, which I'll go there here after I go through my 2 flow charts. So this first one is for CDL drivers. Now I do want to make note that it was updated September 29th of 2020. And that's because there was an hours of service update that they technically corrected the short haul for CDL drivers. They left it alone for non-CDL, but they made it a lot easier for CDL drivers, okay? So the first question, which is actually the very last part of the regulation, it says, do you have a daily time record or daily time card? Notice I put salary employees included, and it comes over here, in order to be a time record, what do you have to have? And that's going to be, again, the start of the shift, the end of the shift, and the total hours on duty, okay? Point number 3, that can be filled in at any time, but we have to have start, stop, and total. So if you think about your team's time cards and you're like, well, our teams, it says yesterday they worked 10 hours, the day before they worked 9.5 hours, the day before they worked 8 hours. That is not a qualifying time record. If the DOT comes in and selects that driver, they're going to say no records of duty status, hence why that is the number 1 violation. So your time card, in order for it to be accepted in short haul, okay, and to stay out of ELDs, you have to meet this flow chart, okay? So let's say we've got our time record. From there, the next question says, have you stayed within 150 air mile radius of your work reporting location? 150. Now you can get on map developers. If you go to my YouTube channel, I show you exactly step by step how to make those maps for your office. Okay. Have you stayed within 150 air mile radius of your work reporting location? That's easy. Sure. We're going to stay right here in our local little hub. Next question. Are you released off duty at the same work reporting location, okay, within the 14 hours, okay? So you can have a 14-hour day. You got to start and stop the same work reporting location. Now, we can dive really thick into the weeds on the short haul. I'm just staying with the basics of it today. If you need questions or need some clarifying facts, please reach out to me. I would happily discuss this even in more in depth from there, okay? And then lastly, once you go off duty, you're required to get 10 hours off. Now, if you answer questions yes to each one of these questions, you're not going to need a logbook. But remember, no matter what, you have to have a time card. Okay, if you're a non-CDL driver, okay, and that's going to be, interstate vehicle or combinations with a gross vehicle weight rating or combination weight rating over 10,000 pounds, so 10,001 or more, or Colorado only 16,001. Again, I'm going to show you that here in a minute. It's almost the exact same flow chart. Okay, we got a little something different happening here, but it's still, you still have to have a time record. Okay, you still have to stay within the 150 air mile radius, and you got to start and stop at the same work reporting location. And then lastly, right here, okay, you are allowed 2 days in your work week to go over 14 hours and still keep this. Where a CDL driver, they don't get that same luxury. Okay, so you can have 14-hour days. That'll put you right at 70 hours. So you're at the top, because 60 and 70 hour rule still does apply to you. But you are, as a non-CDL, you are permitted to have your drivers have 2 additional longer days. Okay, now I told you we'd get to the bottom notes. Okay, if you answer no to any of these questions, whether you're CDL or non-CDL, it's almost the identical rule, is that lands you down here in the bottom, and you'd have to do a logbook. Now you can do a logbook, and you're only going to do one. When you get pulled over and they say, hey, where's the previous 8 days, or where's your other logs, or why aren't you in an ELD? The correct response from your driver is, I am short haul. This is the 1 day this month that I need to drive, or this is the second time in the last 30 days, because a driver, all of your drivers, CDL and non-CDL, each of them can do up to 8 of these paper logs in a 30-day period. Okay, so remember that. That'll kind of help tie, the hours of service together. But again, if you're doing it right, if you got a time card and you just do these logs on the days that you needed, now we're going to start eliminating that no record of duty status top 5 violation. Okay, now special notes. Okay, the 30-minute rest break, it's now the interruption of time. That's going to be when a driver drives straight for 8 straight hours. Okay, they're required to stop and do a different activity for 30 minutes. Okay, it's to help prevent fatigue behind the wheel driving and some stuff like that. Okay, the next rules are the 60 and the 70-hour rules. Okay, you declare you work one or the other. The 70-hour rule, that is for companies that work every day of the week. So no matter what day of the week it is, you have some type of operations out there. It's 70 hours in an 8 consecutive day cycle. Now the 60-hour rule, that's for you companies that you work Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, and the whole company is shut down on Sunday. You are limited to the 60-hour rule. It's 60 hours in 7. Now what that means is once your drivers are on duty for their whole work week, once they get up to 60 hours, they can't drive again until they get time available. So the easiest way to do that is a 34-hour period off. Okay, remember your property carriers for CDL drivers, you guys do have what they call the 16-hour long day. Once a week, as long as you're local, once a week you're allowed to have a longer day, longer than 14 hours. But remember, as a CDL driver, anytime you go over 14 hours, you're required to have this logbook for that day, okay? Which means you also need to train your drivers how to fill out that logbook. Now, I keep saying you can only do 8 paper logs in a 30-day period. Okay, if you do any more than that, okay, and the 9th log, that's going to tie you into an ELD, okay, an electronic logging device. So again, a lot of topics, a lot more and further discussions that we can get into on that one, but I got to keep this thing moving, or we'll get bogged down too deep into the weeds on some of these topics. All right, so with that, we're going to jump in and we're going to start talking about some maintenance. And the training topics that I want to kind of get into you with maintenance is going to be number 1, understanding and interpreting some of the regulations. Look like I might have had a question come in. Let me check that one. So the question is so if our pickup truck has a 12,000 pound gross vehicle weight rating and not towing anything, will we have to do timesheets? That's a really great question. And what I would say is I've got a follow-up question that maybe you can respond to me in that comment, is that 12,000 pound truck, are you staying just in Colorado, or are you going to be driving across a state line? And that kind of thing, because it's 2 different rules, and that kind of goes back to Colorado in 2017. They did an update to the rules, and they changed their weight rating, and it honestly just kind of it made it more complicated. Okay, so appreciate the response, just Colorado. So I would tell you, absolutely not. 12,000 pound truck is not considered a commercial motor vehicle as long as it stays in Colorado. But if he hooks up to a trailer at any time during a shift or any time during the week, that truck is being used at that time with a trailer as a commercial motor vehicle. And I'll show you that here. Again, it's one of my within my next couple slides. Okay. All right. So the first one, understanding and interpreting the regulations for your maintenance training. That means we need to really understand, parts 393 and parts 396. So part 393 is all the parts and accessories necessary for safe operation. Part 396 is vehicle inspection, repair, and maintenance. Okay. The next topic that I'm going to be talking about is going to be, the proper commercial motor vehicle fleet identification. Okay. And how absolutely important fleet identification is. Okay. I want you to define your vehicle maintenance program. What is your program? Is it right for you and your company? Are you following the right procedures, or do you need to switch it up? That kind of thing. Okay. We're going to be talking about documenting vehicle inspections, repair, and maintenance. So what your mechanics, your technicians are doing, how are they documenting? What are they documenting? Are they documenting correctly? Okay. We're going to be talking about understanding the pre-trip and post-trip inspection. Okay. And completing DVIRs. I'll walk you through a DVIR process this morning. And then again, completing those annual inspections, some of those requirements and your qualifications of your technicians. Just because they've been turning wrenches forever does not make them qualified, okay? Unfortunately. So with that, let's get into this program. Okay, so when building your DOT program, okay, avoid the mindset the DOT doesn't require that, all right? The DOT requires you to do anything and everything for you to keep your vehicles in good shape. Okay, the DOT does not want to be your reminding agent, your service reminder of saying, hey, this truck has violations, you need to fix it. No, they don't. They're there to help keep everybody, managing their fleet and doing the repairs, but they don't want to be. They're not part of your service reminder. So you have got to, if you get to that point where every time a truck goes through a roadside inspection and you're getting a handful of violations or even out of service violations, okay, you have got to step back and make some corrective actions to your program. Okay, you should be chasing your maintenance. Your maintenance shouldn't be chasing you. Okay, so the FMCSA requirements, okay, they're very open. It's very vague of what they interpret of what the regulations are. And everybody, when it comes into service has a different idea of what they want their service schedule to be. Whether it be just a generic alphabet service that says, hey, we're going to do the A service on this date and this interval, B service, C service, D service, goes on and on and on. I have seen some very good alphabet service schedules, okay, but they're not necessarily right for every fleet. And sometimes we're going to have some things on that service and something else on a different service schedule. Okay. Maybe you're doing a 5,000 mile fleet service, and that's going to be for maybe your smaller pickups, your pickups with your trailers and some things like that. Maybe you're going to have an annual vehicle service, and I'm not a big fan of that one, but there are some companies that say, hey, we have this truck, but that truck only gets used like 4 times a year. So we are just doing an annual service on it. Okay. You could sell something like that to me by far than some of these companies that are literally using their truck every day, hundreds of miles every day, and they do work on it once a year. And you can just imagine the shape and the condition of those vehicles. So again, you pick your service, you stay with it. One other that I don't mention on here, that's going to be, what is your trailer preventative maintenance schedule? Okay, I will tell you right now, when it comes to DOT, equipment failure, equipment violations, things that trigger an audit, trailers are the bane of DOT safety existence. Because what happens is, some companies are like, well, yeah, if the truck comes in with a trailer, we will do a PM on the trailer. But 9 times out of 10, maybe even a little higher than that, 10 out of 10, trailers don't get worked on unless they're broken. So you need to have some type of preventative program that's out there, checking those brakes throughout the year, checking the hubs throughout the year, checking the tires, making sure that the trailer's in good working order, because again, they tend to really wreak havoc within your DOT program. Okay, step 1, fleet identification. Okay, what is a commercial motor vehicle? That's the big question. And we've even seen that question come up. I've brought it up a couple times, and it was brought up in a question. Okay, so what is that commercial motor vehicle? So in the documents that we emailed you today, you're going to have this trusty dusty flow chart. There's a Colorado intra-state, commercial motor vehicle in compliance, determining if your driver has DOT regulations. The first step is always identifying the fleet. And I'm going to go through a maintenance program. I'm not going to introduce a step two. I'm just going to tell you step one right now that you absolutely have to do is identify your fleet. I will come into offices and sit down with the company. Sometimes we will spend 3 hours just trying to do this, identify what the fleet is. So that is always your first step, because you can't run a DOT program without first knowing what are your regulated vehicles, because that's who it's going to apply to. So step one, identifying your fleet. Now, if you use this flow chart, again, this is the Colorado. I also provided you with the interstate one. We're just going to change some numbers. Overall, it's about the same. We just have to change some numbers. So the first question you're going to answer is right here is the vehicle being operated in commerce to transport either passengers or property? Okay, so if it's not commerce, right, and we don't have transporting property or passengers. Now, when I say passengers, I mean more than 8 for compensation, or more than 15, including the driver, for your just for your business related purposes. Okay, if we answer no to this, we don't have DOT compliance. One of the questions I get is, well, what about a recreational vehicle? Well, we don't have commerce, right? So we're going to still land right over here. But if we answer yes, let's say each of us have, we know it's a business related thing. We come down here. The first question is, does the power unit have a gross vehicle weight rating of 16,001 pounds or more? Okay, so Colorado gross vehicle weight rating, that's when you open up the door and you look at that VIN label on the inside of the door, you're going to find a stamp GVWR, okay, and that is 16,001 pounds or more. If I answer yes to that, you'll see that that'll land me in the DOT compliance required, and I give you some rules and regulations that apply to it. Now, I want to point out, when you look in that big box of rules, you'll see that I have the essential list. I have the non-CDL rules, okay? So this means if that truck does not require a CDL, you still have to adhere to these individual rules. And then right down here below, we have, if CDL, it says everything listed above, but an additional, we've got a few extra rules. Okay. Now, let's say we're just driving like a 3/4 ton pickup, or maybe even that 12,000 pound truck that George brought up with me a minute ago. Okay. It's not over 16,000 pounds. So we would answer no to this. And then that would take us to this next question. Well, what if that truck is towing a trailer? Okay, so if he's towing a trailer, now we're going to look on typically, we'll look where we have the manufacturer's VIN plate, and then we'll see that what the gross vehicle weight rating is there. We'll add the weight rating of the trailer to the weight rating of truck, and that's going to give us the combined, the GCWR, the combined weight rating, which it says here, do the combined units have a GCWR of 16,001? Okay, so 2,500s today. Okay, if you get a 2,500 today, it's got a gross vehicle weight rating of 10,000 pounds even. Okay, there might be one heavier out there. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure, the trucks just keep getting bigger and bigger. So again, 10,000 pounds even. So now if I hook up typically any 2-axle trailer behind it, I'm dealing with a 6, 7, 8,000 pound trailer, maybe a little bit heavier, to that 2,500. When I add those two gross vehicle weight ratings together, it's going to put me over the 16,000 pounds. Now, really quick, let me clarify for you. I am not talking about what these vehicles actually weigh. I am 100% just talking about their weight rating. What the manufacturer says the vehicle weighs with its payload, how heavy it's allowed to go. Okay, that's what we're talking about when we say gross combination weight rating per se. Okay, and then we kind of go down from there. We jump into placardable hazmat vehicle of any size. If it's a placardable amount of hazmat, it makes it a commercial vehicle. And then we've got, again, interstate, designed to transport more than 8, including the driver. And then for Colorado, it's 15 passengers, designed to transport more than 15, makes it a commercial motor vehicle. So a lot of things going on there. Now, here's the deal. When I talk about the easiest way to identify our commercial motor vehicles, I would tell you this. Okay, think of it as pickups with trailers. Okay, all the way up to the big rigs. Okay. If you're driving that as part of your business, pickups and trailers, they're going to be more than likely a commercial motor vehicle here in Colorado. That means all this stuff that we're talking about, other than the drug and alcohol clearinghouse, everything else does apply to it. So right now, hours of service that we've talked about this morning, that applies, that short haul. That's why I gave you a CDO flow chart for hours of service short haul, and I gave you a non-CDL flow chart for hours of service. So, and the reason I talk about this is, I could be sitting in an office and the company will describe, oh, we've got 15 vehicles, and I'll notice that they're all, in common of CDL vehicles. But one of the things that when I'm looking out in their yard, I'll see these pickups and trailers, and I'll ask them, well, what about those units? And they'll literally say to me, well, those don't require a CDL. Okay. And that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about just what are your commercial motor vehicles, okay, which start at 16,001 for Colorado. Any questions on the fleet identification? If there is, please feel free to put that in there. Okay. All right. So with that, setting your preventative maintenance plan, like you have to go through and identify. So what I've got up here, this is just one of my basic generics. I would use this for a company that's just kind of getting started, identifying their fleet. This is a 5,000 mile service interval. So it wouldn't be for a heavy duty rig. This would be for part of that pickup fleet, something like that. But it's going to identify what the service schedule is. And then we will build it up from that point. Build it as we need to go into it. Again, typically the bigger the vehicle, the more strict, because we have more components that are going to fail easier, that kind of thing. So again, when you start your vehicle preventative maintenance program, you've got to start, it's always best to start on the stricter side of things. Okay. It's easier to back off of doing certain things or changing an interval to a lesser standard than it is to start with way little and then try to throw in more strict standards, because again, that's going to start to the vehicle is going to start to deteriorate. You're going to have more downtime, more shop time. And, we all know that the company is not making money unless those trucks are rolling. So we're by having a good preventative maintenance program, I'm trying to help you keep those trucks rolling, because our goal of a preventative maintenance program is to make it from PM inspection to PM inspection with no downtime in the middle. So if you look at this one for like a typical fleet, like a pickup fleet or something like that, we're going 5,000 mile interval. I would say we're trying to get from 5,000 to 10,000, or maybe 70,000 to 75,000, or heck, maybe 275,000 to 280,000. Okay. We're trying to get from that point to the next point without having to work on that truck in the middle. So when you identify and build your PM, you have to know, hey, what are the conditions? What's going to fail on this truck? What's the normal wear and tear? And that's how you have to build your program. You absolutely have got to know your fleet, know what your wear and tear dates, because a lot of having a PM program is having scheduled maintenance, okay? Budgeted cost style services. So again, we talk about that. The goal of our preventative maintenance is to complete that scheduled inspection on our trucks and trailers, okay? Anytime you have a truck come into your shop, okay, whether you're hands-on, whether it's in between maintenance or whatever else, okay, that vehicle should never, ever leave your shop or even leave the professional if you're using a commercial garage, okay? Every work on a commercial vehicle, anytime it's in the shop, should always end with a PM, a quick inspection. Let's just make sure that that truck is still sound in case we got any major factors that we have to fix now, because we don't want the DOT to tell us we had to fix this. So if it comes in and you fix something really quick and it goes back out and it still has bald tires and nobody said, hey, we had it in the shop, but we didn't happen to notice if it had bald tires, okay, that's on you, right? We want to make sure that we're catching those bald tires, getting those fixed so that the DOT is not putting you out of service for something like that. Okay, the next thing, determine the necessity of the repair to minimize downtimes, okay? Because again, maybe that component, such as tires, I can look at that tire and say, nope, I have enough life on that tire. I know it's going to wear appropriately and I can get to the next PM inspection in 5,000 miles. And then you can plan your budgeted maintenance, because you can plan on fixing that on that service interval. after you begin to learn what the tire life is on your vehicles, you can start to ballpark that and plan and budget that maintenance over the case of a year. But again, it takes some really good organization. You have to be in there, and you got to be working with these programs. Our goal is to avoid mechanical downtime between PM inspections and PM services. And I'm aware some of you are probably listening to me, Dan, and just shaking your head and probably thinking, yeah, that is that, you know, we're always going to be fixing stuff. You are, but some of you are fixing a lot more than others, right? And we can't, just because we have a truck and the wheels still go around, doesn't mean that that truck is always fit for duty. Just like a driver's not always fit for duty, sometimes that driver's got to take some time off and get rested up. Well, the same thing happens with that truck. We have to work on it to make sure we're keeping it going. Okay. All right. So when we talk about the rules, understanding what the regulations are, unfortunately, the DOT doesn't just give us a blueprint for vehicle maintenance programs. They don't just say, hey, this is what you should do. What they go through is they say, when we break that down under 396, that's the maintenance, inspection, repair, and maintenance, 396.3, in the general section, it says every motor carrier must systematically inspect, repair, and maintain, or cause to be systematically inspect, repair, and maintain. Okay, so I'm getting a couple different things out of that statement. It says every motor carrier must systematically inspect. Okay, what that means is when you bring your truck into your shop, okay, you have to do a systematic inspection of it. You've got to be on top of it. You got to be looking at it so that you can identify what's got to be repaired. The second thing that I get out of that statement is that you have to have a systematic method of selecting when your trucks have to come in. So there's two things that come from that statement. What is our service schedules? And when we get that vehicle in, are we organized? Do we just go in, fix, like say it needs new tires or it needs some new struts, whatever the case could be? Do we just bring it in, make that repair and send it back out? Or do we bring it in and have a systematic process? Okay, we got it in, we fix that component, we inspect systematically everything, make sure it's good. We're so systematic, we're so on top of this systematic thing that we even have checklists that our mechanics will go through and follow to make sure that they check everything. They document, brake patterns and brake wear. They document tire. They document, air pressures, things like that. So again, what is your systematic method? And it says that if you can't do this in-house, hey, that's okay. You can cause it to be done. You're going to send it to somewhere else in order for that to be systematically inspected and repaired. But remember, again, when you send it outside to a maintenance technician, we just want to make sure that they are qualified. Are they properly doing a good job? Do they do a good systematic inspection every time the vehicle is on their shop floor? Okay. Then from there, it says every vehicle subject to its control. Okay. So when we talk about every unit, every motor vehicle subject to your control, I want you to always remember owned, leased, and used by. Okay, because that used by one, that one gets you in trouble too. And that could be a couple different things. It could be part of a trailer interchange. Maybe you guys are, dragging other people's trailers around. You don't know what the maintenance is on it. But if you get caught pulling it, you're responsible for it, like used by. So it's really important, good pre-trip, to make sure that vehicle is in good standard, okay? Make sure that it is, of course, going to pass an inspection. Make sure it is, in fact, roadworthy. We also run into that situation, own leased. Leased means maybe we have another party doing the work on it, but then we always back into that used by. We've got this one situation that happens quite often, and that's going to be, old Joe's our employee. He's a really great employee, but our insurance company absolutely hates old Joe, okay, because of his driving record or whatever. So what we do with old Joe is Joe uses his own truck and his own trailer, and he takes our products to our job sites and works on them, okay? Whether you got a lease agreement or not, if Joe is using his truck in the furtherance of your commercial business, okay, you're responsible for his maintenance. So you can make old Joe do his maintenance, but he's going to have to give you all those records so you can build a maintenance file for them. Okay. Now, as we kind of go on past the general statement, it says all parts and accessories shall be in safe and proper operating conditions at all times. And that includes what we find in Part 393, which is a really great rule. But that also includes things that are listed in things like the North American Standard out of service criteria book, okay, which is, I think I got that book backwards right here. This one's the 2019 one. They print a new one, but there's sometimes rules that are printed in here that's not actually in the DOT book. Now, the one thing when you start messing around with the out of service guides, okay, that is the officer's guide of when they have the authority to shut you down. And though sometimes some of those components are in violation right at the out of service threshold, some of those, many of the components that are listed in there are in violation long before they go into shutdown status by the DOT. So I don't ever want you to get one of these and say, oh, we run it till we're good there. No, we can't do that. When it comes to that, we have to adhere to this rule, okay? If it says it's a violation here, that's our goal, is to not have a violation that's in that part. So it says the parts and accessories shall be in safe working order, okay? And that's everything included in 393. But again, so make sure you're familiar with that. Make sure that you do some training, with your mechanic staff on that, and that type of thing. So, and then last, if you're doing buses and stuff like that, it says that you have to check your push out windows and your emergency exits every 90 days. It kind of throws that in there, okay? So let's go back to that statement really quick. The DOT doesn't require that, okay? Those are the famous words that I absolutely despise those words, because it always goes back to the same thing. And that is going to be, you've got a safety person that's either lazy or doesn't want to do the work, or they think that they have a better way, okay? Your maintenance program is just like a game of golf and a perfect golf swing, okay? And I'm sure some of you have played golf and know exactly what I'm talking about when you have the perfect golf swing and you hit that ball, how good it feels, how great that ball soars. And some of you know just what it's like to hit that ball right on the top of it and drive it straight into the ground a foot in front of you, right? We've all been there. We know what that's like. But unfortunately, maintenance programs are a lot like that golf swing, where if you hit that sweet spot, you've nailed it for your company. That's right where you want to be. And when somebody comes in and they're like, oh, the DOT doesn't require all that work you're doing, okay, they're going to start topping that ball, and they're going to drive your maintenance program directly into the ground. So be very leery when you start hearing DOT doesn't require that. I just read you the DOT requirements of a maintenance program. They require you to do what it takes to keep your trucks off the radar, to keep your trucks, from going into violation. Like I said, they are not going to be the ones that are the telling you. They're not your service reminder, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so it's clear that a preventative maintenance program is different no matter where you're at. Each person's going to do it a little bit different. Everybody's going to have their own take on it. I can come into 10 different companies and we'll sit down and start talking about it, and I will devise 10 completely different maintenance programs for those 10 companies, depending on what we're working up, okay? So again, when we come into your possible schedules, okay, full service schedule, you got your planned money, that's going to be your budgeted spent, and your procrastination schedule. But the perfect program is going to combine all three of those types of programs, okay? So preventative and maintenance full schedule. This is going to be when you know your service dates, you know your intervals, and we're going to repair things on a schedule because we know specifically what those wear cycles are. And we're just going to keep that truck progressively moving forward. We're not going to let it fall out of spec. Okay, that's a really great one, but it's a little bit more of an expensive service, okay, because we're always fixing and repairing stuff, where a lot of times we get in the habit of running it till it's right there at that threshold. And unfortunately, that habit means we ran it well past that threshold. So like I said, make sure when it comes to your budgeted or your overall maintenance, we want to make sure that, again, you plan that maintenance so that you know what your expenses are going to be. So it doesn't run away with you in cost and that kind of thing. And that's, again, kind of the planned money inspection. We're planning what that budget is. So we're following a schedule. And now once we know our fleet, which we know what our intervals and our time spent on our fleet, we're going to know exactly how long components wear, and it always varies just a little bit depending on who your driver is, different traffic variations, routes. For instance, if you have a company based in Golden, Colorado, and that company has got 10 trucks, okay, 5 of the trucks go to Grand Junction every day, the other 5 go to Sterling every day, we're going to have 2 completely different maintenance programs for that shop. Okay, one's going to have the trucks going to Grand Junction are going to have a by far more aggressive maintenance program than the trucks going to Sterling every day when it comes to brakes. So again, you're going to know what the service intervals, what are the typical wear fashions for those brakes, so that you can stay on top of them and replace them before they go bad or before things wear out and we have a driver crash. So again, you've planned what you're going to do, you know about what you're going to spend on your PMs, and it helps you with your budget because you've gotten organized and you know those wear dates. Okay, how many hours, how many minutes? I mean, we've got it even time. We know exactly how long our shop is going to take to do that service, so we can keep our maintenance technicians moving from working, completing paperwork, moving to that next unit, working, completing paperwork, moving to the next unit. So we know what those service intervals are going to take, and it helps us plan and get a little bit more scheduled. Now, a lot of times that's coming into the A service, B service, but it's also, no different than the 5,000 mile maintenance intervals that we have for the pickups, with hydraulic brakes and that kind of thing. Those trucks, typically we follow the manufacturer's guidelines, but again, as those trucks age, the harder we run them, they start to wear out and tear down, just like the bigger truck with the air brakes. So again, like I said, know what your services are. From there, we move into what's called the procrastination schedule. Now, procrastination kind of gets a bad name when we think about it, but when it comes to maintenance, it really kind of makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Okay, for instance, tires. When we go through and we put tires on a truck, we don't just replace them the next service interval because they got a little bit of wear. No, we procrastinate. We let those tires run out till they get to a certain point. But you as a team, you've got to decide, when is it that we're going to replace those tires? If you're, typically, like if I said, what are the thresholds on tires? It's going to be a wear point at any major tread groove on a steer axle tire of less than 430 seconds, and then all other tires at any major tread groove at any location at a major tread groove at 230 or less than 230 seconds. Now, a lot of people think, like with tires, that's wear at multiple points on that tire, but that's not. And that's a perfect example of where we're dealing with an out of service violation versus a true DOT violation, right? With those two different things. So again, with those tires, if I set my policy for my maintenance plan to say, hey, on steer axle tires, we're not going to go any less than 530 seconds on a major tread groove. That gives you a tire with a little bit of extra life to it, that once it's done with steer axle service, maybe we can move it back to our trailer service, okay, or drive axles or whatever. We can put it on another unit, get just a little more life out of it, but we're getting it away from that steer axle service, okay? And maybe you have a policy for all others that says, hey, we're going to start changing those tires, between either 4 or 330 seconds, because again, we don't want to be right at that wear indication, because then you risk going below that and getting a violation. And violations, remember, once they hit your DOT profile, it takes 2 years to get those off. And if you continue to have violations and they identify trends in it, then your safety score, you go up in your safety management score, and then the DOT triggers you for an audit, okay? So again, like I said, manage procrastination, set your policy. What are the parameters around those wear components, whether it be brakes, tires, you name it. Make sure that you know what that wear schedule is when you're going to plan on replacing certain components that naturally wear out with time. Okay. Using parts and equipment to the point of failure is going to compromise your safety program. So that's why it is so important to figure out what your wear components are and plan on fixing those. Okay. One example that I get is on kingpins on trailers. Okay. For the coupling device, the kingpin that hooks into the fifth wheel plate. I get a lot of shops, a lot of maintenance technicians that I train that call me, and they are getting pushback from companies because the company says, well, the DOT regulations don't have a rule that says what the wear is on a kingpin. Okay. And they're right. It's not, they didn't write it in here. There's no way that they can write every little thing in here, but they did write that it has to be within spec, right, of the manufacturer, and they make kingpin gauges on them. So that is a component that wears out, right? If it's starting to show wear, we replace it. It's one of those, kind of cracks me up that people say, well, it doesn't say how much wear it can have, so we're going to continue to push it, even though it's clearly showing wear on a kingpin. I'm like, well, if you continue to push it and it's showing wear, and the kingpin gauge shows that it's in a potential fail status, by continuing to push it, you're saying, hey, we're going to push it till it fails. And that means you're at risk of losing an entire trailer on the highway. I mean, imagine that crash, right? So again, repair those, identify those components that are going to wear so you don't compromise your safety. Now, typically when the procrastination schedule, typically it's these schedules are left to one person. Okay. And this is where I'll see companies will really struggle and fail with their maintenance, because they'll have a really great maintenance technician, or they'll have a really great maintenance manager that's helping to do this, or service writer, whatever you want to go with that. But that's the one person that knows what all these standards are when we're going to repair. So I got technicians working on stuff, and they're making their own judgment calls if this is good or this is bad. So again, whatever you outline as your maintenance, what your procrastination schedule is, what your expectations are, you have to train and communicate that with your shop. Okay, to make sure that they know exactly what it is that they are also supposed to be doing, and when they're supposed to go through and replace or repair these defective components. Okay, so again, shop personnel, communicate, know what those standards are, know what, when you bring a new technician in, don't just assume that he or she knows. They might be bringing some bad, bad practices from another shop. So make sure that everybody knows what it is that your standard is. Okay. So, all right. So what we're going to do in order to create that successful PM program, preventative maintenance, we're going to mash up all of these different programs, right? We're going to have a little bit of our scheduled maintenance. We're going to have, a whole lot of procrastination schedule, and we're going to have some budgeted planned spending activities. We're going to mash those all together. But again, like I said, that's where I said, when I go back to that statement, maybe we want to start a little bit stricter in the beginning and then back off as we kind of, understand what our wear patterns are and things like that. So the first thing that we got to do in order to build this program is we need to have good quality inspections. Okay. Meaning when a truck comes in, your technician should never just fix it and kick it out. Okay, fix it, kick it out. We were out a couple years ago. I was out working with a company up here in Weld County, and they were really having some struggles with their vehicle maintenance. So what we did was I brought up a team. We set up so we could do some mock inspections, right? So we set up before they left their premises. They would come through. We'd take 5 minutes, and I'd have somebody on the back and the side, somebody underneath, somebody talking to the driver and doing the front. And we kind of teamed up, and we inspected, like, hey, how would you do today if the DOT stops you, which is a really great practice and service that we do, because that helps you as a company say, hey, we would have done really good with our inspections if we got stopped today. Good job, shop. Good job, drivers. Or vice versa would happen. You'd say, we have a couple areas that we need to step up on. And the good thing about that is we're identifying those without affecting your safety rating. Okay. So again, good quality and consistency of inspections. Where are you guys at? What exactly are you doing? How is your shop? How is the mechanic staff? How are they doing those inspections? They should always, if they've got a vehicle they're hands on, when they finish up, again, I know I've said that already, but they should always do a good inspection on it before they kick it back out to the field. Okay. After they do the inspection, they can identify new wear patterns, like, hey, maybe a tire wore more different. Maybe brakes are wearing, or brake linings are cracking. Maybe you identified, hey, we got some bad reconditioned brake linings. Okay. And the table wasn't quite true, and we're getting cracks in them, or they're missized. They're not quite right. Again, we're going to identify that, and we wouldn't have unless we did a preventative maintenance program or PM inspection interval, because we were working on that vehicle. So again, always be looking at it, making sure that your plan is getting followed, okay, and you're prepared for it, okay. And again, that's also where we're going to manage that procrastination schedule, because every time we do an inspection on it, one of the things that we're doing is we're writing down our measurements, our our tire wear, we're brake wear, you know, all that different thing, brake life. We know what those differences are. That way we're able to budget for them in the upcoming years. We know what our wear patterns are. Of course, they always fluctuate just a little bit, but hopefully you set up your procrastination schedule enough that you're going to be repairing or changing components out before they fail. That'll give you that little bit of extra life to carry it through so that we don't have a crash or we don't get a DOT violation. Ultimately, our goal is to keep everybody safe. Now, always keep in mind your safety objectives, right? That's our goal, okay? Don't set up this plan to wear things to failure rate, okay? That's where you start, next thing you know, you start having multiple things fail. The time that trucks stay with your mechanics become longer. That means the time that trucks are able to get into mechanics grows also longer. And next thing you know, our maintenance is out of control and we can't keep up with it. So again, make sure that you know what those operational objectives are. Okay, so understanding your maintenance intervals, kind of going back and talking about everything, summarizing everything that I just kind of packed into this for you, is again, knowing and tracking all those different wear components. Okay, that could be anything from brakes, air brake measurements, what your push rod travels are. It could be what is the wear patterns for your brake pads inside your trailers. Maybe you're running electric brake trailers. Okay, electric brake trailers, man, the DOT loves those things, especially because their brakes are constantly failing. And that's because people aren't fixing them, okay? So again, identify what your plan is and what the lining, where is on each of your brake components. Tire tread depth, like I said, I would definitely pick a pattern that says, hey, we're not going to run it clear to the end of life, but we're going to run it just up to that component, swap those tires out, and that way that'll also give you some tires that you can move around on that vehicle so that you can tire match. Like, one of your policies is going to be, we're not going to put a brand new tire next to a bald tire. I'm going to put a half-life tire next to a half-life tire, or I'm going to put a brand new tire next to a brand new tire in a dual set, because that'll help prevent excessive wear and wearing too quickly on a tire from having to carry too much of the load because the other one is bad. Okay, hubs and seals. What is your plan of attack with hubs and seals? I was actually at a company yesterday. Yesterday morning we were talking, a little safety program we were doing with them, and I actually heard the management tell the drivers, and the drivers were all talking about out in the field how they're opening up their hubs and this and that, and they're adding lubricant. And I'm like literally in the corner of the room, just like cringing. I'm like, why in the world is this company, okay, who just passed around pictures of hub failures, okay, why in the world are drivers in the field opening up those hubs, okay, and applying fluid? Okay, the slightest little contamination that gets into those bearings is going to cause that hub to fail. So why would I want drivers doing that? Okay, I think it'd be better to have a policy that says if the driver thinks that they have a hub issue, that they get the shop involved and that maintenance technician does what he or she needs to do to clear that hub, clean it, and make sure we're not introducing contaminants and prolonging the life of those wheel bearings and that wheel seal and everything. So again, hubs, make sure what is your hub seal, what is your plan with that, and do that. And one of the things I'm just going to tell you, we had a big problem with it in 2022 with hubs and violations with companies, and that was because companies were going through, and we saw them through my work with them, they were doing a lot more hub replacements, wheel seals jobs, especially on trailers, but they had a lot of them were already blown out and there was grease on the wheel, but they didn't take time after they fixed it to wash all that grease off of the wheel. And the DOT, it's a violation. If you pull into a checkpoint and you got fresh grease on the wheel, the DOT officer's not going to tear your hub down to see if it's okay. They're going to write it up as a violation. So remember, if you do a hub job on a trailer or on a truck or whatever, wash that, get that steam pressure washer out and clean that grease off that wheel so the DOT is not confused when they go through and do it. Okay, battery life, alternator, you name it. This list could be, very extensive of all the different wear components. The point that I'm just trying to make with you today is, again, let's make sure that we're pinpointing that. All right, the next topic, and if you have any questions on the preventative maintenance schedule, please type that in. I'm going to move now into periodic, annual, inspections. Okay. One of the most, probably the most vital inspections that are done out there, besides when that truck, that trailer was manufactured and left the line, okay, is when it comes out into the field, at least at a minimum of once a year, your maintenance technicians or a commercial shop of your choice is going to have to do an annual inspection on the truck and the trailer. If you're using dolly converters, it's going to have one. Okay. Every vehicle, every unit within that combination is required to have an annual inspection. Okay. So with that, periodic annual inspections have got to be completed at least once annually. So, one of the things that I look at is, if it's that great of an inspection, which it is, we do these. I have a team that does them. There are lots of companies that do them out and about. And here's the deal. Like when I walk up to a truck, very seldomly do I see it pass. Like when you all call me out and say, hey, look at my fleet, we're going to come in with a list of repairs that need to get fixed on it. Okay. If you send it to a commercial shop, it's the same thing. But if you're doing it in your shop and your maintenance technician's like, yep, it passes. Here's the sticker. Here's the report. Okay. And you don't see that stuff's getting repaired, you're probably pencil whipping it, right? And that's what my bullet point is here. But here's the deal. If it's done right, it's one of the most important inspections. And I can't take credit for this. This was actually taught to me by a really great shop manager, Warren Spear, up here at JBS in Greeley. He's got a absolutely fantastic shop floor. And I'll tell you this, when I come out, I learn from you all, okay, a lot. Like I come in and have one idea, and sometimes you all will introduce me to a new concept. Well, Warren did that for me. And one of his rules is for JBS, when you've got a truck or a trailer on the shop floor, if they are hands-on, they will renew that annual inspection. It didn't matter if they did that annual inspection, a quarter ago, 3 months ago, or if they're doing it right now, they will always renew that annual inspection, and it helps them tremendously. So I understand that's probably a big ask for a lot of you to say, hey, once a quarter, renew your annual inspection. And that's not what I'm doing, what I'm saying. But why not have a policy that says, hey, our annual inspections within 6 months of expiration, anytime we've got it on a shop floor, why not just renew that annual? Let's make sure that truck, goes through a good, clean D.O.T. inspection internally. Let's get it back caught up and going. An annual inspection, depending on the combination, only takes an hour to an hour and a half. The repairs take a lot longer, but the inspection itself, an hour to an hour and a half. Now, the deeper you got to dig, the more upside down you are on your maintenance, of course, it's going to take a little bit longer. Okay. All right. Now with that, the general PM inspections, they're very similar to an annual. Okay. So it's just a little bit more in depth if you're going to do that annual inspection, because hopefully you all commit to that, to anytime you have a vehicle, a trailer, anything that you're hands on with your mechanic, before they say, hey, this vehicle's a go, and send it back out to the field, they're going to do that new PM inspection. Well, they're set up perfectly. If they start that policy and get really good at their inspections, they're set up perfectly to also include an annual a little bit more frequently than the bare minimum once every 12 months. Okay. Now, every periodic inspection should have a list of repairs. So as a safety person, as a manager of the company, you should be following up, monitoring your maintenance technicians. Okay. If they're doing their own annual inspections, go to the maintenance file once they're done and look at what they did to repair that truck, that trailer, that pickup, okay? Whether it be a half-ton pickup, whether it be a three-quarter-ton pickup, or whether it be a 5500, okay? Or all the way up to the big rigs. Look at it, see what the list of repairs are. If it's a trailer, I guarantee, especially these electric brake trailers that are getting drugged behind these pickup trucks, I guarantee you it's going to have a list of repairs. Breakaway brake cable, battery, okay? That battery only lasts a year if you can get a year out of it. Okay. Hubs, tires, okay. Rewelding certain components, redecking, and then we get up into the bigger trailers. You've got brakes, you've got airlines, you've got chafing going on. You're going to have some blown seals out of some brake cans. Okay. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So again, like I said, every periodic inspection should always have a list of repairs. Now, like I said, our team, I have an inspector that works for me, and I too do inspections. When we go out and do repairs, I always have a list of repairs. So when I go to one of my clients and they're like, here's the annual inspection, and I don't see that repairs are made, yeah, that's a problem, and that's very problematic. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, Ryan, that's because we work on the truck first, and then we finish up before we release it. We do the annual inspection. I get what you're saying if you're thinking that, but here's the deal. If you worked on the truck first, I would still see a list of repairs, okay? And I don't. Unfortunately, a lot of times I absolutely don't. So you have to document those repairs. Now, we talk about the periodic inspection report, right? This is probably one of the absolutely most common ones that we have out there. Again, let's just make sure that we're filling it out completely and in its entirety. It's one of those things that people do get wrong. So just real quick, I want to talk about that. So again, the report number, that's up to you. I have my own sequence that I use. If you have a report number, sometimes you'll have a decal that'll have like a serial number on it. You can tie those together. Maybe you got a computer system that's generating a report number. Great, you can use that. But if you don't have anything, you're welcome to leave it blank. Fleet unit number, okay? You should have your fleet, trucks, trailers, everything should have its own unit numbers, okay? If you can, use that. If you're like, hey, we only have like 2 trucks, we don't need 2 unit numbers, we got the red truck and the blue truck, I see that too. Hey, that's fine. If that is the case, then under that unit number, just put red truck, blue truck. If you don't even have that, put in I like to use the Colorado license plate number that's on that vehicle right now, okay? And then, of course, the date. Now, this, I want you to make mental note. It says date. It doesn't say month and year, okay? Some of the decals, you can put month and year. On the report, it needs to be the exact date of the inspection because you have to show proof around that inspection of the hands-on work that you did, meaning your staff has to write down all the work they did leading up to it and or just after they did the inspection, showing that they made all those repairs. Okay, the rest of this is pretty simple. Identify the vehicle, inspector name. Now right here it says they meet the qualifications in 396.19. This is not as simple as just I've been turning wrenches for 20 years. I see it. I got a question. I'll get to it in just a second. Okay, this is not as simple as just I'm turning wrenches in 20 years. I teach periodic annual inspection. We hold classes throughout the year. I get some maintenance technicians that go through my class annually. Some go through it every couple years. Some go through it every 5 years. Some, they just come the first time. But I always gauge the room. Sometimes we'll have brand new people in it. And sometimes I'll have folks in there that've been like, hey, I've been turning wrenches for 40 years. Here's the deal. Those folks are absolute geniuses at turning wrenches. Okay, but when it comes to the inspection, they're lacking because they don't know the rules. They don't know the true limitations of those components. They know when they're broken, but they don't know what the wear components, what the expectations of the DOT are. So you have to provide training, okay? Absolutely have to provide training to those. All right, let me get to this question that I got right here. It says, do new trucks need to have an annual inspection before they go into service? Absolutely. That's a great question. And yes, they do. Prior to using any commercial motor vehicles, okay, or going back to my little flow chart, if you answer yes in the, is this a commercial motor vehicle, and you land over there into all the DOT topics that you have to have, okay, that truck and that trailer does have to have an annual DOT, even if it's brand new. Now, you could ask, like if you're purchasing it brand new, you could ask that the dealership or whomever to do that first annual for you. I've been noticing more and more that they don't like to do that because I just don't think they want the liability, or maybe their inspectors, their mechanics don't meet this. They're not qualified under 396.19, and that's fine too. You would just have to have it done. You can either do an annual inspection yourself if you're qualified, or you can have somebody else go through and do that. Now, again, like I said, I teach those qualification classes. The way the rule is written, I can't qualify your technician, but I can sure train them to help them meet their qualification. There's several standards that have to be met. Okay, next thing that we run into is your vehicle identification, okay? I like to use VIN number on this inspection report, and I get a lot of people, a lot of maintenance technicians that say, oh, Ryan, do I really have to write the full VIN number on there? Can I just write the last 8 digits? And this is my response. Don't be lazy. Okay, write all 17 numbers on there. Okay, that identifies that vehicle. That way it locks that report to that vehicle. Okay, so make sure you're using the VIN. Sometimes the VIN, especially on older trucks, older trailers, it might be partially obliterated. Try to do your best to get that whole VIN on there. Now, if you're a commercial agency, let's say you're doing, annual inspections professionally, like we do. Okay, if we come out and do an inspection, we're going to put Front Range Compliance Services on there in our location, because the DOT, if something happens to your truck, they might want to track us down, okay? Or they might want to check our qualifications. So for you, remember to check. If you're using a third-party shop, make sure that this field is completely filled out. Okay, now filling out the rest of this, okay? It's a check mark if it's okay, if it's an X if it needs a repair, and if it did need a repair, it's a repair date, okay? And here's the deal. Maintenance technicians throughout this country are not doing what they're supposed to do with this report. They just either check and write in A where it's supposed to be, but they're not putting an X on this report. Okay, if they didn't want you to put an X on the report, okay, they wouldn't have made the report this way. Okay, so yes, if I put an X in that needs repair, that means it failed the inspection. But to get it back into pass, all I've got to do is put the repair date right here and then check off as soon as it passes. Okay, so it'll be check, X, and repair. Then you're just telling the DOT, hey, we repaired this. I should be able to go to your maintenance file and see whatever this repair date was between the date of the inspection and the actual repair date to see what the mechanic did, because they are required to write that down. Okay, so again, make sure you're filling out these reports correctly. Now the decal, okay, that trusty dusty little thing. Okay, again, try to be consistent where you place your decal. There's no rules where everybody has their preference. I hear, hey, I put my decal over on the passenger side because the port of entry, that way they can see it when I'm clearing a port. It's a 3-inch by 2-inch label. They're not going to be able to read that decal, okay, from there. But if that's where you want to put it, great. Me personally, I like it as close to the driver's compartment as possible, because I want that driver looking at it every day. Part of my checks and balances when they're doing their pre-trip and post-trip. That way I can see that, hey, you know what? It's getting close to expiration. They're going to be maybe writing it up on a DVIR, whatever the case could be. But get these decals and put them on the truck. Okay. Now, as a special note, when it comes to the annual periodic inspection, okay, in the event, let's say you do an annual and then your truck goes through a DOT checkpoint, okay, and the roadside guy writes you up for violations, okay, that should have been detected during that roadside or during that periodic annual. If that happens to you, you have got to step up and start an internal investigation of why did that happen to you, because somebody pencil whipped that report and you're about ready to get in some severe hot water. If a DOT audit happens and they come in and they determine that you're just putting inspections on or decals on trucks, you're not truly doing good inspections, okay, they will come after you. They're going to look at that as a fictitious report, okay? They're going to come after you for qualification using unqualified maintenance technicians, and it can get super ugly really, really fast, okay? We had a Colorado company several years ago, got about $150,000 fine from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration because they were doing inappropriate annual inspections, okay? And that's just the one that I know about, okay? There could have been several, in that same time frame, okay? So again, like I said, if you see that you have an inspection and it looks bad and it just went through an annual, find out what in the world's going on, because somebody didn't do their job. All right, from there, we're going to talk about the inspector qualifications. So, here's the deal. When it comes to inspection qualifications, there are two things additionally that you have to do. Okay, not only do we want to get a mechanic who knows how to turn wrenches and knows how to fix stuff, but we also want to make sure that they know how to do the inspection, which means they got to know the rules. And unfortunately, those two don't always come together real well. Okay, so that's why we want to do training. Now, with that, we want to make sure that you've ensured your technician that they're properly qualified. So with that, we're going to ask them some questions. One of those is, how many years of experience do you have? Okay, now they only have to have that 1 year of experience in order to be a maintenance tech or to do an annual inspector, but it has to be 1 year with the type of fleet that they're in. So one time I was teaching this class, the periodic annual inspection training, and I always gauge my room. In the very beginning, I want everybody to tell me what their experiences are. And I had this guy, he stood up and he said, I'm so-and-so. I've got 21 years turning wrenches at the Honda garage. And I just recently started working up in the oil field and started doing annual inspections. So I waited till the break and I pulled him aside and I said, okay, let's talk about this. You know, your number of years experience. I said, how long have you been in the oil fields? And he's like, oh, I just started there 3 months ago. And I said, are you already doing annual inspections? And he said, yes. Now, I followed that question up with, is this the first time that you've worked on these types of vehicles and this type of fleet? And he said, yes. His experience, 21 years at the Honda garage, he was working on Honda automobiles. Okay, so he moved from Honda, where I'm sure he got some great experience turning wrenches, into the oil field, which has a plethora of different types of equipment. Okay, I had to let him know, unfortunately, he had to have 1 year of experience in the oil field with all that equipment before he could be considered qualified to do those annual inspections. Okay, so again, a lot of that is making sure you know how to talk to your technicians, find out the type of experience they have, and have somebody work with them to make sure they truly know. There's plenty of guys that lie about their experience. You put them in with an air brake vehicle, and next thing you know, they're doing something foolish like manually adjusting automatic brake adjusters and calling that a proper fix. You don't do that, all right? You got to fix them first. So again, we want to make sure that we have the proper people working. Okay, so talk to them. Some questions. What do they know about the program? What have they done to be qualified, and that type of thing. Identify your leaders within your program, within your own shop, so that they can also monitor and work with them. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's somebody within your shop. But you have to identify that. Just like building your maintenance program, now you're building your actual shop plan. We can build the world's best maintenance program, but if we got the wrong guys pushing the agenda in the shop and they don't know what they're doing, it's all for nothing, right? So we got to make sure that we're working with those technicians. Provide some initial and recurrent training, okay? One of the big classes that I do is that Appendix A to 396, and that's the inspector qualifications training. We do those, several times a year, and eventually we'll have that class up and available digitally on D.O.T. University, but there's a lot that goes into that, so we're not quite there yet. Okay, questions to ask, okay, again, for their qualifications. Do they know what Appendix G or Appendix A is, okay? If they don't know that simple question, I can tell you already, they're not qualified, because that is the minimum periodic inspection standards, okay? What's the next thing you can ask them is, what's the maximum push rod travel for a clamp type 20? 24 or 30 brake chamber, okay, and go through that. Do they know the measurements? Okay, every once in a while they will, but I will tell you probably about 95% of the time, 97% of the time, when I'm teaching these classes and I ask these types of questions, these guys do not know what the proper push rod travels are, and that's because they haven't truly been trained in these qualification standards. Okay, the next one is, what's the allowable horizontal movement between a fifth wheel pivot bracket? What's the movement? How many inches? Or what is the measurement that's allowed? And it's not even in the inches, it's 3/8 of an inch. But again, we want to make sure that your maintenance technicians know that, and I could again almost guarantee you that they don't. What's the procedure for checking steering wheel free play, steering lash? How are they doing it? What's their procedure? Get up there and have them demonstrate. I've actually been through a DOT audit where the officers made the mechanics go to the truck and demonstrate some of these in front of them. So again, make sure that you're doing kind of to the same standards. Okay, ask them, what's the allowable steering wheel lash for like an 18-inch steering wheel? Kind of go through those. Do they know what those are? Again, if they don't know the rules, they don't know the procedures, then they're not qualified. Okay, ask them questions like, what is the procedure for checking a tractor protection valve? That's going to simulate we're breaking a trailer away from a tractor and we lose air. Okay, what is the overall pressure and what is the procedures and the protocol for that in the steps. Okay, and if the technicians can't answer those questions, it's fine. We're not saying they're bad technicians. We're just identifying that this is a technician that, of course, needs to have just a little bit of training. Okay, brake inspectors, it's the same type of thing. We've got to make sure that they're qualified. They need to have at least 1 year, and they need to receive some brake training. So make sure you're doing that brake training. Now, I personally, I will do it in my appendix. My periodic inspection, I will do a basic brake inspection, but I do not do the full-blown class for brakes, but I do know an individual that does. So again, if that's something that you've identified that you need, reach out to me. I'll get you in touch with the right person, and hopefully you can get some brake training set up for you. So again, make sure that your maintenance technicians, okay, are performing their brake adjustments, or they're not just simply performing brake adjustments, okay? We want to make sure that your brake technicians are repairing that brake after the repair, then they can adjust it so that it can be utilized. But do not, like I said, if you know, one of the questions you could talk to them about is like, hey, let's say you got a Type 30 brake and it's at 2¼ inches. Well, how would you handle that? A Type 30 brake at standard, and it's at 2¼ inches. How would you deal with that? And that maintenance technician says, hey, you know what? I grabbed my 7/16 inch wrench, and I would tighten the ratchet all the way down, back it off a half a turn. They just did a brake adjustment. Okay, I would say, nope, you're not qualified to do brakes yet. You got to go through some brake training, because again, if you know anything about this, okay, if you've listened to me speak at other places about brakes, I will tell you right now, okay, that is a ticking time bomb. Adjusting auto adjusting brakes, manually adjusting auto brakes, auto slack adjusters is a ticking time bomb, and you are going to get a driver hurt or killed or somebody else out there on the roadway, because the brakes have to be repaired. If they're going out of adjustment, that automatic slack adjuster is communicating with you saying, hey, something is out of whack in this brake, it needs a fix it, and then that slack adjuster should start working correctly again. So make sure, again, you're questioning your technicians, and so that they understand that. Okay, I will tell you this right now, a lot of brake technicians, a lot of your maintenance technicians need training on this, because they have picked up some bad habits, and those bad habits could potentially lead you to a fiery crash. And I don't want to see any of you on the news and, you know, be a part of that. So again, let's keep our guys safe and make sure that we're doing proper brakes. Okay, so with that one, again, drivers, encourage them, must not be permitted to perform those brake inspections. Okay, all right, that's all I've got for periodic and qualifications. Okay, so from there, let's go ahead and talk about the DVIR. We're on our downhill swing here. We're going to be wrapping this up here in just a little bit. So the daily inspections. Okay, when we talk about that, part of the task that drivers have to do is every day, excuse me a second, every day when they start their shift, your drivers have to do a pre-trip inspection. And every day when they cease ending an inspection, they have to do a post-trip inspections, okay? It's not a simple, oh, do they have to do a post-trip inspection? Yeah, they do, because you have to complete your DVIR at the end of the shift, and you're not going to be able to check off if everything is good and working unless you take a minute and walk around that vehicle, okay? Because if they're not doing a post-trip inspection at the end of the shift, then tomorrow they got to do a pre-trip. And I don't know about you, but me personally, I would rather find out at 5 p.m. that I got a nail in a tire and I got to get it fixed, rather than 5 minutes before they're scheduled to leave in the morning. Okay, so like I said, make sure they're doing pre-trip and post-trip inspections, okay? And that's going to be every vehicle that they operate within their shift. So if you've got an individual that drives 2 or 3 different trailers in a shift, then every time they hook up to a different trailer, there's going to be a new pre-trip. If I jump into somebody else's power unit, I'm going to have to go through and do that inspection, that pre-trip inspection. And then when I'm done with it, take a minute and do a post-trip inspection. Now, whenever we do that, we also have to make sure that we're doing an emergency equipment inspection. So the pre-trip covers all the parts and accessories that are necessary for safety. And in fact, that rule is written, it says that no driver shall drive unless he or she is satisfied that all those components are good, which means they do a pre-trip. If they find stuff wrong, okay, that is of DOT safety ordinance, if they're in that DOT realm, that those components need to be fixed before that truck is allowed to run. And that's, again, it goes all the way back to that preventative maintenance program, which is why it's so important to be right-sided with your maintenance program, because if not, then when you do a pre-trip, okay, maybe you find something here or there, but if you're like, hey, there's 20 things wrong with every truck, every trailer, every day, you're never going to catch up unless you shut your entire fleet down and start working on it, which is why this all kind of comes together to this right now, this very moment. We're right at this point that truck is ready to leave and go to work for you. We'll want to make sure that it is ready to go. Okay. Now with that one, you got to check all the components. Then the emergency equipment, triangles, fire extinguishers, and spare fuses. Now, when it comes to your triangles, you got to have 3 of them in the box. You can't have triangle pieces. You got to have the actual triangles. The second one would be the fire extinguisher. Now, remember, fire extinguishers, they need to be readily available. So if you got them in a different compartment or a door, you need to make sure it says fire extinguisher, okay, inside. But you also need to make sure that it's readily available. So when I open that door, I can get to it. When you need a fire extinguisher, you need it right now. You do not have time and delay. And sometimes, these guys will have like 400 pounds of gear stacked on top of that fire extinguisher. Man, by the time they get that truck unloaded, get it out, it's going to be too late, okay? Things are going to be completely engulfed. So get that fire extinguisher. Now, the fire extinguisher has to be properly secured. It can't be just tumbling around, bouncing inside the cab. So it either needs to be stowed in like a little covey, or it's got to be bolted down and bracketed and latched down. So, okay, so we need to be checking that. We need to make sure that gauge is in green, make sure that we don't have any fire extinguishing elements, coming out of the, any of the, out of the tube, so we're losing the fire retardant coming out. Again, if you got powder coming out the end of the tube, that extinguisher is no good. And then lastly, your spare fuses. You need to have at least one spare fuse for every type of fuse that you have in there, just one extra additional. Now, some of these new trucks are coming with circuit breakers. The DOT has not given me any guidance on what to do with these circuit breakers. Okay, and the last thing is going to be your cargo inspection. Okay, cargo securement inspection. We want to make sure that with that, we're checking our chains, we're checking our decking, we're checking our straps, we're making sure that we have enough straps or chains holding whatever piece of equipment down for that. Okay, and then again, I tell everybody, look, always go through, always be looking, checking, things out, as you're kind of en route there. So, when your driver stops for their morning breakfast, or they pack their lunch at 7-Eleven, or they're getting their energy drinks, or they stop to use the restrooms, whatever the case could be, teach them that whenever they stop, get out, inspect everything on one side. When they walk back to the vehicle, walk down and check that out. Okay, now when they go through and they complete their inspection, as they find defects, they have to document them on their DVIR. So, and then that DVIR has to be turned into you, and the truck has to be fixed before it's dispatched out there. Okay, so again, you have two different options with that. I would say just stick with this one. Make sure if the truck has defects, we're doing a DVR and you are maintaining it. I'm not going to dive much more into it than that, but let's kind of run through real quick what needs to happen on this DVIR. Okay, number one, let's say I got this make-believe company. It's called Run Real Hard Trucking. Okay, with their fake address of 12345 Colorado Drive in Commerce City. Again, that's a fictitious address, so don't go looking for it. We say this driver did the inspection yesterday on 3/14 at 3:00 p.m. Now, when he did the inspection, he went through, he discovered he had some lights down there. Now, again, drivers, mechanics, everybody gets mixed up on the name of lights. Like, everybody knows what headlights, turn signals are, brake lights, and four-ways. But when I start talking about all those other lights, okay, y'all are always confused on what that is called and what those are. So make sure that they put a description down below. So I checked lights and I put rear ID light, rear marker light. Okay, now I guarantee you, okay, if we were all sitting in a room and I was asking or pointing around the room or pointing at lights up on the board, or if we were standing in front of a truck, people would be giving me the wrong name for these lights. So one of the things that I like to tell people, especially if you're still doing paper DVIRs, your driver can quite simply draw a box with an arrow pointed forward and then put an X in the arrow in the area where those lights are at. That will at least help the maintenance technician be quicker about their job. If it just comes in and it just says lights are out and then we got the wrong light in the description, that means that maintenance technician has to go and walk around every truck that comes in with a violation like that and try to pinpoint exactly what lights they're talking about. Okay, that adds a lot of extra time and efficiency. So again, get your team organized with that. Now, if you got trailers, you can log multiple trailers on one DVIR report, but you can only use one power unit. Okay, so you can do multiple trailers on here. Just make sure in your remarks that you pinpoint which trailer had which defect documented on there. Okay, so with this one, I said brakes, and we said, so this would be an electric brake trailer. It says the trailer breakaway cable. It's got something going on with the breakaway cable. Could be broken, could be need a carabiner. The whole breakaway system may not be working, but again, make that fix. Now your driver will sign here. When it comes into your signature signs, we got a driver signature, and then we have the third signature line is also a driver signature. Okay, that third signature line is not to be signed until the truck is dispatched, like it's been fixed or it's not been fixed, whatever the case is. That third signature line is certification that the driver understands why, and also says that, hey, I'm about to drive this, I'm satisfied with the repair. So again, like I said, make sure that driver is documenting that. So again, right here, it's going to go to the mechanic. He said that he fixed it. He probably replaced the bulbs, replaced that trailer breakaway brake cable. And then now the date on that was the 14th. Now tomorrow, the next driver is going to come in. They're going to pick up this report. Then during their pre-trip, they're going to verify that the lights were fixed. They're going to verify that the trailer breakaway brake is fixed. And then once they're satisfied, before they drive it again, okay, then they're going to sign off here. Now, sometimes drivers will check off on things that don't necessarily matter. They're not necessarily, something that's for safety. Okay, just have your mechanic will check the above defects need not be corrected for safe operation. But if it's listed in this book, okay, then it's got to be fixed because it's listed in this book as a defect that's got to be fixed for safe operation. So again, I've had people say, well, Ryan, if you think I'm going to shut a truck down because it's got a license plate light out, you got another thing coming. And my response to those individuals are, if you got to shut a truck down because you got a license plate light out, you got a lot bigger issues than just a license plate light. Okay. Our whole goal today is let's get this whole program built to where we're at right now. And that also takes documentation and maintenance. The last topic I really want to talk to you about, and that's going to be your maintenance technicians have got to document. They got to write down what they've done. Okay. This whole thing is kind of led up to this. You can have the best mechanic in the world. They might turn their wrenches really, really well, but if they cannot write down the work that they're doing, then they're worthless. I mean, if they're that good of a mechanic, you might as well just hire them an assistant to follow them around and write it down. I mean, if they're that good, okay? But if they can't write the stuff down themselves and you get no documented maintenance or they do a really bad job of documenting the work that they've done, they're worthless to you in that program because it has to be documented. That way you can track your own maintenance program. If they're not documenting, you don't know where you're at any given moment within your overall maintenance program. So again, make sure you have that. Now, every truck and every vehicle, okay, every trailer needs to have its own maintenance file. All these forms, all these reports, your systematic inspections, your documentation, everything has got to go in there, and it should be chronological by date that you've done. And it's even a great idea to have like a maintenance log that says it was in on this day and this was just the basic work that was done, and then you can go to the file to see that. There are some electronic systems that are out there, but there are also we can do a lot with spreadsheets. So again, make sure that you're doing that program. Now, how you make sure is by auditing it. Make sure that you're checking, following up. Go through when your truck goes through a roadside inspection. Follow up with the maintenance file. Did they document and properly document the repairs that had to be done? When there's an annual inspection, I like to look 2 weeks before an annual, 2 weeks after. Okay. Did they document the things that they had to fix for that annual inspection? And then, of course, if a driver turns in a DVIR, you can follow that process through to see if the maintenance was done. There's 3 simple ways right there of doing your own audit. Now, make sure your maintenance file documents this information. You need to have a unit number, the year, the make, the VIN, and the tire size. That can either be on your maintenance file or it can be like on a spreadsheet. Again, that's all stuff that you have to have in a DOT retention, our DOT program. Okay. Now, when it comes to maintenance files, one of the common questions is how long do I need to keep the maintenance file? So on an active vehicle, you're going to keep all the maintenance documents for a year. I always recommend at least 2 years. Okay, because that's what the history of the DOT tracks. Annual inspections, you always need to have the last 14 months of annual inspections in that file and that kind of thing. And if you're doing buses, you need to keep it. Now, if you get rid of the vehicle, you have to keep that file for an additional 6 months. So again, it's always a good idea to keep it a little bit longer from there. Okay, that was a lot of information in the 2-hour time frame. So hopefully I kept y'all with me and we didn't talk about anything, and lost anybody. These topics, I'm happy to help you with. You've got my phone number right there at 720-951-1184. You can also email me at info@frontrangecompliance.com. You can also go to our website, frontrangecompliance.com. Some of the forms and stuff that we have on there for free, you can download those and print those up. You can also go to DOTuniversity.org. We've got a few classes on there for the companies, for your drivers. We got a great defensive driver one. We got pre-trip, post-trip, not for 18-wheelers, but our pre-trip, post-trip we have on there right now is for the guys driving the pickups and the trailers. So get some options on there. Again, if you want to do some of our training at DOT University, give us a call. We'll give you a little coupon code so you can save a little bit of money from there. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and open this up for questions. Okay. Oh, I got a Stacy. Hey, Stacy, how are you? You're welcome. Thanks for joining us, Stacy. All right. Anybody else? If you have any questions, please feel free to jump in there. Okay. Joyce says, does a certified inspector need to recertify or complete a refresher? No, that's kind of one of those things like, training is really kind of up to you. So again, when it comes to qualifications and training, you can do a lot of it internally. You can build your own training program. I recommend everybody goes through a refresher, at least when it comes to periodic annual inspections, every few years, no more than 5 years, because it gets that refresh. And that's no different like reasonable suspicion going into drug and alcohol. I think, the DOT doesn't require you to have, backup or refresher training, but I think it's absolutely pertinent every couple years, 2-3 years, to go through refresher because it brings those thoughts. You start thinking about them again, and that kind of thing. And so reasonable suspicion, that'd be a great one for refresher. Another great one is the periodic inspection, but also PTI training with the drivers. Okay, I like to do pre-trip, post-trip. I teach that like 4 different ways with drivers because I don't want it to become stale. I'm always trying to keep them guessing on how I'm going to train. I don't want them just coming into my training and just being like, oh, it's the DOT guy again. No, I want them coming into my training. I want them to listen. I want them to get involved. I want to see their heads nodding. Okay. And we get that interaction. So most definitely train frequently, do refresher training, whether the DOT regulation on training is just like maintenance. It says you're required to train in all aspects. So if things start to go south and you haven't done training, they're going to have an issue with it. So great question, Joyce. I'm really glad you brought that up. Okay. Yep. Thank you for the information. Greatly appreciate it. Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. I appreciate you all coming in. I'll stick on here for just a little bit. Please feel free to, unmute yourself if you want to just kind of openly ask questions in the forum. I'll do what I can to answer them. And if nobody has any questions, I'm gonna call it from here.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We really appreciate it. Incredible information. I know we have a couple questions coming in, but I just want to let people know if you're dropping off now, make sure that you're checking your email for a follow-up that will have a link to the recording and Ryan's presentation information. And then also next week, Wednesday, is our bidding and estimating class for trucking companies. So that's going to be taught by someone who's works for Iron Woman Construction and Environmental. And I think it's going to be great. It'll open your eyes probably a little bit on what the going rates are in town and how to best kind of put your estimates together. So definitely make sure that you show up for that one next week as well. And then go ahead, Ryan. I see Hector's got a question in there for you.
Yeah, Hector. How you doing, Hector? I would tell you this. Yes, I am familiar with the Fleetio program. It is it's a nice program. There's a lot of really great programs out there. The thing I like about Fleetio is you can actually do some customization with it, and kind of build it to meet your exact program. But just like anything else, any electronic maintenance program that you're using, data in equals the data out. So I mean, if you're saying, hey, we want to run a repair and maintenance program for 15 trucks, is investing the time and the management that goes into Fleet EO, would that be right? When I would say, we manage companies with hundreds of trucks using Excel, and I love it because people will say, "Oh, I hate Excel," or Excel is just not powerful enough, and that's not true. You can do a lot with Excel. Like I said, we manage hundreds of companies and sometimes hundreds of trucks within those companies utilizing Excel. So again, data in equals data out. Every maintenance program that you use out there, it gets turned into what you turn it into. And a lot of companies will go through and they'll buy one program and then they'll run it for a year or two, and then things go in the toilet, and their solution is they get sold on another program. Well, it's supposed to be the grand all fix all, and then a couple of years their program's still in the toilet. Again, data in equals data out. So with a 10 to 15 truck company, I would do everything personally with Excel, proper maintenance files, and proper maintenance log, and we would get that built as super simple as we could. Sometimes easier is better, if that makes sense. So, all right, perfect. Okay. Oh, hey, Bobby, thanks for your comment there. I appreciate that. It's good seeing you on here again. Tell Ryan I said hi. Perfect. All righty. All right. Well, if I don't have any other questions with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up.